Hi guys, so welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing another episode in my collection series, and today I'm going to be showing you my face palette collection, which you can see beautifully laid out right here. So I've included everything from full face palettes to just kind of blush palettes or duos. I haven't included, the only thing I chose to leave out was my Patrick Tar cheek duos, because they are sort of, I just didn't feel like they were palettes, if you see what I mean. I felt like they were more so just a blush product. So everything else you see here is a palette, either with multiple shades of blush or with all different cheek products, or with different shades of the same product. And these are my weakness when it comes to makeup. I adore cheek face palettes. I absolutely love them. This is my newest addition, this Nars, what's it called? The Hot Fix palette. This is my absolute adore. Right now, I'm going to be talking you through my favourites, some of the fails, the ones I don't really use, and the most loved in my collection. So let's start off at the bottom here. This is fairly old. I guess it's maybe a year ago. This collection, this Light Wonder, or was it Electric Wonder or Light Wonder? This is the Ignite Wonder cheek palette from that collection from MAC. It had a couple of bronzers in there and some lip products as usual, but this for me was like the standout product. I absolutely love this. This is a highlight palette, so everything in here is different shades of highlight. I kind of bought this with the hope that these shades, so this bronzy shade and this sort of rosy shade, would actually be like blushes on me, but they're really not. They are all definitely highlights. If you had very fair skin, perhaps they would be, you know, maybe a sort of blushing highlight or a highlighting blush, but for me that certainly wasn't the case. They are just different shades of highlight, perfect for a makeup artist, because they all will work with different skin tones. I actually really like this formula. It's really nice and luminous, but just not too much, not over the top. Not really what I expected from MAC, but I love this packaging as well. I think it's just absolutely gorgeous. So next up, this is the Hourglass blush palette that came out last year that was everybody went nuts for. This is the Ghost collection. Oh my goodness, I adore this palette. This shade up here doesn't really show up on me as a blush. It's a very gorgeous either blush topper or like a highlight on me, but the others all work beautifully. This is one absolutely gorgeous sort of coral luminous blush. I actually really like this pink, which I didn't expect. I thought I'll never use that shade because I'm just not a pink blush kind of girl, but I really do love it. I don't use this a lot because I am really worried about it running out, because it was limited obviously. So yeah, I definitely don't want to use this up, but it's one of my absolute favorites of the whole bunch, and you can just see they're all glowing. This pink is a little softer, it's not as luminous and glowing as the other shades, and obviously this shade up here is the most luminous, more of a highlight on my skin, but I absolutely love all of these shades. I really feel like you just can't go wrong with an Hourglass face palette, to be honest. Next up, my two Natasha Denona cheek palettes. So this is Love. I'm just currently trying to decide whether her latest bronze palette is going to join my collection or not. So depending on when this goes up, it will either be in my possession or I will have chosen to skip it. I'm just a little unsure about that one. But this Love palette is just stunning, an absolute favourite. This Glow Impact Powder, I'm always asking Natasha on her Instagram if she will bring out these as singles, because they are my favourite highlight formula. Look at the glow on that. I hope you can see that. It just manages to be super beaming while staying really soft and not adding texture, and really smooth. I absolutely love these Glow Impact powders in both these palettes. I wish she'd bring them out as singles. This cream, it's not a cream, sorry. This is a cream, only one cream in this palette, and then this is a sort of creamy powder, really, formula. But this is her Super Glow formula. This is a like blush, or a really super glowy blush, no need for highlight. The shift in this coral gold shift is out of this world. Another stunning palette, and the most heavenly packaging. I just love this, like snow globe quality. So next up, the other cheek palette I have from Natasha Denona, which is the Tan, Bronze and Glow palette. This, as you can probably see, has got a lot of use. I love everything in here. She's got, again, one of her Super Glow formulas, which I wish this shade was a single, because again, I just love it. Just the gorgeous gold tone. But again, this Glow Impact powder, one of my absolute favorite highlights, and I wish it was available as a single, because I think, you know, Natasha's single highlights don't have the best shade range. Her Super Glows, only 3 shades available in that one, and some of these shades in here are just absolutely screaming out to be singles. So I wish she would bring these, especially the Glow Impact powders, because like I said, they are my favourite highlight formula. So I wish she would bring those out as a single. But this palette, if you were going to choose one of the cheek palettes, I would go for this one, because there isn't anything in here you won't use. You know, the bronzer is very easy to use. You can use everything in here, cheek and eye. The cream is just stunning and soft. You've kind of got a shade for everybody. I can use the Super Glow more so in summer, and the Glow Impact powder in winter. You know, there's just, you cannot go wrong. I don't think you wouldn't dislike this one. Whereas the bronze palette I know has been hit and miss for people, and the Love palette, depending on how much you love glowing cheeks, some of these might be the diamond powder, you know, people love it or hate it, and this Super Glow shade might be too glowy for a blush for you. If you're lighter skin, you may not want to use that. So I feel like if you want to pick one, then the Bronze and Glow Tan palette is probably your safest option. It's just stunning. Look at those shades, absolutely beautiful. So next at the top here, we've got this Charlotte Tilbury Bar of Gold highlight palette. You can see this is very well used. I didn't go through and clean everything, because one, it would have taken me hours, but two, it's kind of helpful to see how used things are from my perspective. I really like this palette. I don't love the packaging, which is really unusual for Charlotte Tilbury, because I usually adore the packaging. These highlights are really blinding, but again, similarly to the Natasha Denona, they are blinding but stay smooth and without enhancing texture. And I love that you've got these 3 tones. I really enjoy this middle shade on me, but I do mix them all together. This one is kind of too light for me in summer, and this one maybe a little too light in winter, but mixed together they're perfect all year round. And this middle shade is just always perfect. This is probably one of my oldest here. I think actually the Balm is my oldest as far as I can tell, but this one I've had for a very long time as well. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Instant Look in a palette, that's right, and it's the shade Beauty Glow. I think this is actually limited edition, but she brings them out in various different shades. So there is one that's available at the moment, but it isn't this variety. I don't know that it looks particularly well used, but there are huge dents in the bronzer and also in these eyeshadows. This, for me, I very rarely use this in my day-to-day makeup, but if I go away, it's almost always taken with me. So if I go on holiday, if I'm traveling for work, because it's just foolproof. You know, you can use all of these shades, although in theory this is a bronzer, a highlight, blushes and eyeshadow. You can use them, you know, you can use these on the eye, you can use the bronzer and the highlight on the eye, so that there is a lot of options in here, and everything is just perfectly soft and easy to wear. So it's perfect for me, you know, if I'm going away with work and I just want to do a work appropriate makeup. I'll put the blushes over here so you can see. This is super light, this bronzer. You can see there it's not going to work on me now, so it is more of a winter palette for me, this, but very, very pretty, very easy to wear, perfect if you're just trying to, you know, do your makeup on the go. This Chantecaille Chic duo has become very quickly one of the absolute loves of my life. I've talked about this in all of my kind of favourites videos recently. It has that stunning manta ray on the front and just the most glorious products inside. So this is a highlight and a blush in here. Oh, I just love both of these shades. This blush needs quite a bit of building up on me, but I really like that because it's just never too much. And the highlight is everything. These two products, the blush and the highlight, have become absolute favourites for me. I'm just wearing them all of the time and actually struggling to make myself use anything else. I adore them. The blush finish is just the perfect natural luminous finish without being a hint of glitter or shimmer, and the highlight is just melt into the skin. I mean, you can probably see on my wrist, obviously the underside of my arm is quite a lot lighter than, you know, it's the lightest part of my body because it doesn't get any sun, but it just melts into my skin tone, this highlight. It is just the perfect shade. Next up, a real oldie but a goodie. This is Hourglass's Ambient Lighting Unlocked palette, the original palette. So this was brought back this year, but this palette was from the original launch. Again, it kind of looks a little unloved. I do kind of use it sparingly, but both are, well, in fact, the whole top row is very flat now, as these powders start off with, you know, a big dome. But yeah, the top row with the ambient lighting powders and the bronzer is all quite flattened out now. And the blushes, not so much. They're not my favourite blushes. I think this shade in particular isn't really my colour, but I do like them, but they just, yeah, they aren't my kind of most reached for shades. I love these ambient lighting powders. They are the perfect colour, but these are limited to this palette, and I wish they'd bring out particularly this middle shade as a single, because I find it hard to find the perfect colour in these ambient lighting powders, but that is definitely a good one for me. And then this is the bronzer, which is very, very glowy, with some particles of glitter in there. So I don't necessarily reach for that one that much, but when I do, I always enjoy it. But I don't really use this palette a lot, I will say that. I don't really know why. I do enjoy it, I do like it, but yeah, it's not an absolute favourite in comparison to some of these here. This is the Dior Backstage palette. I think this is the first one they brought out. So it has 4 shades of, they call them, these 2 bottom shades, blushes, but to me, I think really they are 4 highlights, because they are very luminous. I mean, I don't know who's going to wear this as a blush, honestly. I did try that in the review that I originally did, but yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot for most people. These are very metallic, these highlights. I love this gold shade. It's beautiful. The white is obviously kind of an inner corner highlight for me. I'm not going to be able to use this on my face because it really is quite white. The pink is super pretty on the cheeks. This bronzy shade on the eyes, or as, you know, a cheek topper. It's a lovely palette. I really don't use it very much at all, but I do need to pick it back up because it is a forgotten love in my collection, that's for sure. It's kind of, I guess I'm almost underrating it myself. Next up, this is the Charlotte Tilbury Glowgasm face palette in the shade, I think the shade is Lovegasm, that's right. And this is the darker of the two. Now this one, you can see, is extremely well loved. One of my absolute favourites here. I love this palette. Every product in here is perfect for me. I love the 2 blushes. Look at that blush. I mean, I think, again, on first glance, these look too metallic to be blushes. This one less so. This is the more subtle. This one is crazy luminous. But I will say that as you kind of blend these onto the cheeks, they do blend in nicely, and you do lose a little bit of the metallic quality that you've got in this one. It does become softer, especially if you mix the two together. The bronzer is gorgeous, one of my favourite bronzers. This is one of my favourite cheek palettes. I use it a lot. It is very battered, as you can see, and glorious packaging. I wish this, and in fact the bar of gold, was more so in this packaging, because particularly the bar of gold, it's very light, and it's just not, to me, it's just not Charlotte Tilbury's brand at all, that packaging. But this is glorious. So I did mention this one earlier. This is the Nars Hot Fix palette. That mirrored packaging, hard to keep from blinding you, so I'm sorry about that. But yeah, this is an absolute favourite. It might even be my ultimate favourite of all of these here. It's just rare to find a cheek palette that has 3 blushes and 1 highlight, where you will use, you know, the whole thing every day of your life, and there's nothing in there that won't work when you're a bit tanned, or that won't work when you're fair, or that you just don't like, you know, the shade. I adore every product in here. Every single product in here is everyday wear, absolute love for me. You've got a more mauve tone there, a kind of peachy brown shade there, and then this glorious luminous blush on the end. And I love mixing these together. The highlight is super beautiful. It's quite metallic for me. It's not a subtle blush, but at the same time, it is, again, like that smooth, not enhancing texture. It's just so easy going for every day. I've been loving this so much. It's just beautiful. I would highly recommend this one. Next up at the top here, we've got this Becca by Khloe and Malika palette. This I like. I don't love it. I think I prefer the bronzer in here more so than the other products. I guess the others, you know, again, the blushes, they're okay. I think the whole palette is nice, but it's not like a love of my life. I think everything in here is just nice as opposed to being super special. But yeah, it is nice. I got it from TK Maxx, actually, this palette, so I'm glad I didn't pay full price because I don't use it a lot, but I do like it. It is a beautiful palette. But yeah, it's not the one that I would repurchase, for example, if I lost it or I used it up. Next up, this is the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Ambient Strobe Lighting palette, sorry. So this was re-released earlier this year in a blind panic because everyone went nuts for this a couple of years ago. This was a limited edition palette at Christmas, I believe, and everyone's been screaming for it to come back ever since, and it did. Now, when I first reviewed this, it was quite terrifying because these are definitely the most intense highlighters that I probably have in my collection. I mean, you can just see they are really purely metallic, and they need to be used with, like, well, for the effect that I like, a very light hand and a very fluffy natural brush. I've definitely got the hang of them now, but this is definitely a use with caution for me because it is very easy for me to go way over the top with this palette. So I do find using my Sonia G fluffy fan brush is super useful to keep things, you know, kind of looking like I'm of this world. Next up, as I mentioned earlier, this is probably my oldest palette of the bunch, and this is the Balm's Manizer Sisters. So it's got the absolute classic, maybe my first ever highlight, which is the Mary Lou. Still such a pretty highlight. I've never really used the others. This is Cindy Lou and Betty Lou. I think this is probably like a Jaclyn Hill old school recommendation, this purchase for me. So you can see in comparison to, these are the Hourglass swatches, and then the Balm here, much more muted and softer highlights, and again, something for different skin tones. So if you're on a budget and you're looking for something that will work for multiple skin tones, and you can certainly use this blush, this Cindy Lou as a blush because it's just not too crazy. It's really super soft. So yeah, definitely a more wallet friendly option. This little palette was from MAC's, I think it's the Snowball collection, and I love this. This is the darker palette. There was a light to medium and a medium deep, and I picked the medium deep because I preferred the blush in here. So this has, I think, 3 brand new shades. Yep, so these are not existing shades, any of these, which is soul destroying because this blush is one of my favourite blushes of all time. It is the perfect copper. These are is it Extra Dimension Skin Finish, or yes, Extra Dimension Blush, Extra Dimension Skin Finish, and an Extra Dimension Bronzer. And this blush, it's just the most perfect finish. Same with the bronzer. They are really buttery, creamy, and they're luminous, but very like invisible glitter. You know, it's much more of a luminosity in the blush and bronzer than there is any kind of shimmer. And I just think this is the perfect blush for me, that's stunning peachy copper tone that I just can't find anything similar in that finish, and I love it. So yeah, in summer this is a real go-to palette for me, and again one that I like to travel with because it's just easy. One of my favourite products from MAC actually, that palette. At the bottom I have 2 ABH blush trios. This is the shade Berry Adore, and I think this one is Peachy Love. Yes, so both of these came from my TK Maxx. The peach one is definitely my favourite. I really only use the peachy shade in Pool Party. What do I trying to call this? Peachy Adore, sorry, not Pool Party. Peachy Adore. I really only use the orange in there, and it is a nice orange. The other shades just aren't really my type of shades, but obviously you can look at this and know that this is a Charlotte blush palette. I love all 3 shades in here. They are absolutely up my street, and I love like mixing them all together. That's the worst swatch I've ever done in my whole life. You can just see in these tones from this Peachy Love trio, these are really my tones and just perfect for every day. I mix them together a lot of the time, and that gives a beautiful effect as well. But yeah, this one, the berry palette, I don't really use. I'm much more of a peachy girl, you know me. And now over to the very last row, and I have my 2 Charlotte Tilbury Bronze and Glow palettes, the lighter and the darker. Now the bronzer in the darker palette is one of my favourite bronzers of all time. I love the lighter palette, but the bronzer is super light for me. I mean, you can barely see it, and that's on the underside of my arm, like where I'm fairest. So yeah, I can't really use this in winter. I mean, sorry, in summer, but in winter, I've got a lot of use out of this one. It's gorgeous. The darker palette highlight I don't really use because it's very orangey on my skin tone, but the bronzer I absolutely adore. It's just beautiful, and it's got the perfect finish. I bought this, the darker shade, because of Temptalia's review, where it just looked like the perfect finish. Just the most luminous, gorgeous bronzer. There definitely needs to be, as I'm sure you can see here, a 3rd shade in this product, because the light, as you can see, is very light. Too light for me even. This shade is, you know, the highlight's a little too much for me as far as being orangey, but the bronzer is spot on. And obviously that leaves, you know, you needing a real true deep palette. But I really love the bronzer out of this palette. I think it's really underrated actually. And again, the packaging on these, much more what I expect from Charlotte Tilbury, that's for sure, than like these palettes. And now lastly, but not leastly, my Jouer blush duos. So I have the Cheeky Summer, which was the newer one, and I have the Adore, which is the peachy. You know, I'm sure you can see straight away the Adore shade is too light for me in summer, but beautiful in winter and very easy to use. I mean, I could probably solely use the darker shade at the moment and have a very subtle blush, but yeah, the Cheeky Summer is like, if you wanted a deeper toned version, then Cheeky Summer is perfect, because it is very similar as far as tones, but it's just much richer. Sorry, and I absolutely love this duo. It is just beautiful, and Cheeky Summer is the right name for it, because I feel like these shades are just perfect summer blush shades. Again, the luminous shade is luminous, but it's not glittery or shimmery or sparkly. It's just a luminous glow on the skin, and mixed in with the deeper shade, which isn't as glowy, it can be just very, very subtly luminous on the skin, and it's just, they're very, very pretty. I really, really love these palettes. So there you have it. That was my entire cheek slash face palette collection. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know which of these you have down below, what your favourite cheek palettes are, face palettes are, because as I say, they are my absolute weakness, my makeup soft spot, and I'm always up for finding new loves. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'd love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye 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 bye.